Hello, everyone. Hypocrisy. What does that word mean to you? Nowadays, this word hypocrisy to me is a word that fits perfectly my previous religion, the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, otherwise known as the Watchtower or the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. Why am I saying this? Well, I'm going to prove to you why I'm saying this. But before I do, I want to say this. I am not married to any religion whatsoever. To me, they're all the same. But I have to say that when it comes to religions, I can't think of any other religion that has changed its mind and doctrines and beliefs over and over as time goes on, as time went on, as the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. And what is worst is that when they do, they blame their members for having followed their previous doctrines, for having followed their previous teachings. And that, my friends, makes the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses one of the most hypocritical religion there is. Let's take the example of military service. Military service is always something that the Watchtower had forbidden its members to go to, and that's okay. But the problem was that substitute service was not allowed either. So back then, a few years back, brothers were not only not allowed to take military service, but they were not allowed to take substitute service either. So they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, they could accept to take a substitute service, but they would be disfellowshipped from their religion. Or, on the other hand, they could refuse the military and the substitute services both, but be spending sometimes years and years in jail. Now, I'm going to prove to you that what I'm saying, I'm not just taking it out of my hat. Okay, I'm going to show you some written proofs, and I'm going to show you a clip of a true story. It's the account of a true story that should tell you something, whether you are a Jehovah's Witness or not, that should really give you a good idea about what type of organization, what type of religion you belong to. And also, not only this organization had forbidden people to take a substitute service while they already could not go into the military service, but when they decided years later that substitute service was okay, they had the nerves to not only not apologize to those poor brothers who had spent years, sometimes over a decade in jail for refusing not military service, but for refusing substitute service. Not only they did not apologize to those poor guys, but they blamed them. They blamed that on their conscience, saying that their conscience was too strict. If that is not hypocritical and downright disgusting, I don't know what is. So let's go ahead and see if what I'm talking about is true or not. Here is what it says in Crisis of Conscience, the book written by Ray Fran's former governing body. The official position of the Watchtower Society developed in the early 1940s during the Second World War was that if one of Jehovah's Witnesses accepted such alternative service, he had compromised, had broken integrity with God. The reasoning behind this was that because this service was substitute, it therefore took the place of what it substituted for and came to stand for the same thing. Since it was offered in place of military service, and since military service involved the shedding of blood, then anyone accepting the substitute became blood guilty. Now, to back that up, here is a paragraph in the United in Worship of the Only True God, 1983, page 167. An examination of the historical fact shows that not only have Jehovah's Witnesses refused to put on military uniform and take up arms, but during the past half century and more, they have also declined to do non-combatant service or to accept other work assignments as a substitute for military service. Many of Jehovah's Witnesses have been imprisoned because they would not violate their Christian neutrality. Indeed, in 1996, Watchtower capitulated their stance, once again allowing military service and civilian duty as a matter of conscience, presumably only in non-combatant roles. Now here's a paragraph on JW Facts. It is sad to think of the many Jehovah's Witnesses that have languished in prison during their youth, were persecuted and even killed at Watchtower direction, only to find that civilian service is now considered an acceptable option. Now, what you are going to hear now is from JT, from the Critical Thinker, and it's a true story. It's what the Watchtower does to people.
The alternative service. That alternative service is when people are asked by their country to go into the military, the draft as it were, and they say, no, I'm a conscientious objector, I don't believe in going to war. And so in a lot of countries, they recognize that they may have citizens who, for conscious reasons, don't want to serve in the military. So they set up what's called alternative service, which means you now can do a job at the hospital or work on a road crew, but you won't get paid. And so you do that in lieu of going to jail. Well, this is what the Watchtower taught for years. They taught that if you are Jehovah's Witness and you're an 18-year-old Jehovah's Witness and you're called before the draft board, you would explain to them that you will not be accepting the alternative service job, that work at the hospital, because you're doing nothing but just substituting and you're not maintaining your neutrality. And so as Jehovah's Witnesses around the world, young men who went before draft boards and they were given the alternative of going to work in the military, not working in the military, but to work in hospitals and so, they turned it down and they went to jail. I remember we had a governing body member that got back from a zone visit, and he'd been down to the Asian Pacific countries doing a zone visit. And he was relating the experience of how their brothers in certain countries that he'd visited, these guys serve 12 years. They get called up before the draft board. They come in. They say, are you going to take the alternative service job? No. They send them off to jail. At the end of their 4 years, they bring them back. You going to go to the Army, or are you going to take the alternative? No. They go back to jail. This is 8 years. They bring them back sometimes a third time. Same question. You going to go serve in the Army? You going to go serve in alternative service? No. And they go back to jail again. So we're talking about a young man from 18 to 30 years of age. 30 years of age. He comes out of jail. He's a felon. He now will have a difficult time getting a job. Anybody who looks at any application, especially in the United States, down at the bottom, they got little boxes. Have you ever been convicted of a felon? People who work in human resources, they'll tell you, if I see that box check, that is going to file 13. Now, it might not be legal to do that, but they do, because people who are felons, they're going to have a hard time getting employment. Well, the problem was The society decided to change the teaching, leaving thousands of young men all around the world languishing in prisons all around the world. Now, I'm thinking to myself, this is ridiculous because people's lives have been impacted by your teachings that you said were teachings of God. It's like Daniel in the lion's den. It's like the 3 Hebrew boys in the fire. That's what I'm going through for this teaching. And the teaching turned out not to be anything that the Bible ever supported. And this is people's lives. You can't jack with people's lives. One day you teach, this is what God says. Next day you're coming back, my bad. Now, I personally knew someone back in North Carolina who went to prison during the Vietnam War. In fact, as kids, when we was growing up, that was actually how we learned about this brother and got to know him. And so he came to be a brother that we knew. And I remember, how he would often relate what happened. How that when he got his draft letter, him and his mom, they went to the body bells and they asked, look, would I be able to get into any program or anything? What do you think? And of course, the brothers told him, look, right now the society's position is that you're going to have to go to prison or you're going to be dealt with by the congregation. But look, we got the circus here coming in a couple of weeks. Why don't we wait and see if he has any new information from the society? So, when he would tell the story, he waited and during the meeting that night, that Tuesday night, he said his stomach was just in knots. So they went in the back room, they met with the circuit overseer, and he said, well, right now, brother, as far as I know, you're going to have to go to prison. He said, but what I can do, I can contact society, I can contact them just to make sure. He said, we'll get together again on Thursday night after the meeting. So he said for the next 2 days, he couldn't hardly sleep. So when he gets back together on Thursday night, at that particular time, because the way the meetings were structured for the visit circuit overseer, circuit says, I'm sorry. Society says, what's in print, basically. And so he went to prison. Now, this particular brother, when they came out with this change, this man was serving as an elder. It crushed him. It really crushed him. And the reason why it crushed him was not only did the society change the teaching, and this is very important for any Jehovah's Witness who is listening to this broadcast, the society blamed the brothers who went to jail. That's amazing. I mean, you're talking about slapping somebody in the face. First you come out and tell them, oh, I know you went to jail for 4 years, but the Bible really didn't say you had to go to jail. Well, the society basically said the reason you guys went to jail is because your conscience was so strict. And he was, he's a crushed man because they blamed him for going to jail when that wasn't the case at all. He didn't go to jail because his conscience was too strict. He went to jail because the Watchtower said, if you take this job as an alternative service job, you are not maintaining neutrality. Now, to add more insult to this, I mean, the society just keeps on piling insult on top of insult to these people. They didn't come up with an article. Did you suffer needlessly? How do you feel? Do you feel that you suffered needlessly for God? Can you imagine somebody going to jail? They find out that they went to jail not because God or the Bible said so, but because some writers out of New York City, that's what they came up with and put in the magazine. They read it, they believed it, they applied it, they went to jail. And then to come out and be asked, do you feel you suffered needlessly for God? No. The person will be like, no, I didn't suffer needlessly for God. I suffered needlessly for some guys in the writing department who thought this is what I need to be doing.
So how do you feel when you hear stories like that? How do you feel when you're exposed to the truth about your religion? How does that make you feel? Well, you know what they say. You can bring the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. So all we can do is give you the facts, give you the information that we have, and the proof that what we're saying is the truth about your religion. But we can't make decision for you. But remember this, though. When you are willingly sharing in the hypocrisy of your religion, you are willingly being also a hypocrite. Something to think about.
When you stop and start asking critical thinking questions, you stand back and you're like, that don't sound like something God would be involved in. God would not send people by the thousands to jail only to change his mind. And then when you find out that it had nothing to do with God. So basically these guys could have gone and taken these jobs with no problem. Can you imagine, man, if a brother went before a draft board? He goes before a draft board, right? And he's standing there and he's explaining, very eloquently, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, as a Christian, we won't take alternative service job because it's really just a substitution and I'm going to maintain my Christian neutrality and everything. And, you got his mom and daddy standing over there and they all proud. Look at my son. He's taking a stand for the truth. Then you got some elders standing. Look at the brother Jones is taking a stand for the truth. He's a good young man. Okay. He go to jail. He's sitting in jail for 2 weeks. New magazine come out. Can you imagine this guy like, could I go back and talk to the draft board again? Then he wants to come back in front of the draft board. He's like, I know when I was here 2 weeks ago, I told you I couldn't take the alternative service job, but I got this new magazine from New York, Bethel, Watchtower, governing body. They sent this new magazine, and it says I can take the job now. Is that job still open for alternative service? Can you imagine that? We're talking about playing with people's lives. And then you see this similar pattern. And the pattern that you see is very simple. What you see are human opinions that have been elevated to divine status.